Manitoulin.
Thank you, Speaker. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak to Bill G19, Residential Tenancy Act Amendments. We have heard from many of our colleagues over and over the past few days, months, about the issue with this bill, namely that it does little, if anything, to actually make rent more affordable for everyday Ontarians. We have heard the disturbing statistics about the massive number of people in many cities across this province who are on wait lists for affordable housing, who live in shelters, and who are experiencing extreme poverty as a result of high rent costs. Capping the allowable annual rent increase, which is charged by landlords to 2.5%, doesn't address the reality that rent is just too darn high these days. I was speaking with a young woman yesterday. She's in her 30s, and let's call her Claire. She's very well educated and has a really good job. She is also a single mother of a young son who is in daycare. But when I asked her about her housing situation and the cost of rent, it was evident that sky-high rent costs are not just a serious everyday problem and concern for low-income people and those around and below the poverty line. Even those with full-time jobs are having great difficulties paying their rent and keeping afloat. Previously, this woman lived in a shared housing, which gave her cheap rent. However, once her child was born, she needed to find a different place. She has a two-bedroom home, modest, it's an apartment, which she paid $1,300 a month for 4 years. Or actually, this was 4 years ago. However, this rent has been subject to rent increases annually, making it much higher now. But this is cheap in the city, so she tells me. With no job security, she was unemployed after her maternity leave, leaving her in a desperate situation, facing homelessness with a small baby. Thankfully, after months and months of looking for work and using cash advances on her visa to pay for rent, to pay for food, she was lucky enough she found a job, just in time to have her landlord tell her that his daughter was going to move into the apartment that she held, and she now had to move out. She looked at dozens of apartments. However, rent had risen hundreds of dollars over the past few years. Everything was so much more expensive for her, and a challenge to finding something, just a little something for her to call her home. Her landlord told her she could stay if she agreed to pay the hydro bills, which had been previously included in her rent. She agreed, knowing full well that what she was agreeing to and what he was proposing was technically not allowed under the Landlord-Tenants Act. But she knew full well that even with paying the extra for the hydro bill, the rent would still be cheaper than many of the other options that she looked at. She was not in a position to challenge him, not even though what was going on she knew full well was illegal. Even though this young woman makes over $50,000 a year after taxes, she pays over 50% of her income on rent. She pays another 25% on daycare costs, which she is one of the few fortunate ones to have subsidized daycare in this city, leaving 25% of her income for massive student loan repayments, bills, food, and other household essentials. Often she must rent her other bedroom and sleep with her son just because she can't afford to live on her single salary. This is an endless stress which plagues so many people in this province of ours. The length people must go to keep up and to keep a roof over their heads, the money borrowed from credit cards just to be paid back with tons of interest. Every day, thousands of Ontarians are facing the reality that they are just a small step away from homelessness, from despair. So when reading this bill, it is not hard to see that a savings of a few dollars a month does nothing to help this working mother or other like her pay their rent and stay afloat each month. We know that she is 1 in 5 Ontarians who pay more than half her income on rent. The NDP would work to phase in a new housing benefit of $100 a month for individuals and $125 a month for families who pay more than 30% of their income on rent. Now that is something that would help. We're here in this legislature because we're elected by our constituents to listen to their concerns and commit to working on their behalf to making their life a little bit better and affordable for them. It really just takes a few moments to ask people about their housing situation, and you will hear the same story over and over again, time and time again. It doesn't matter where you live in this province. The need for affordable housing is an alarming, widespread crisis. I think that we can do better, and we must. When I hear the staggering numbers of people in urban areas who are desperately in need of more affordable housing, I too remember the many First Nations communities I visited just a short time ago. This country was made aware of dire housing conditions facing the community of Attawapiskat last fall. I was in that community. I looked in the faces. I seen the eyes. I noticed the despair. I seen the frustration. I felt it. Excuse me. But on my tour, too much ice. But on my tour through many other First Nations communities, it was evident that this was not just a crisis unique to Attawapiskat. There are countless other First Nations communities who are living in similar troubling conditions. In my riding of Algoma Manitoulin, there are hundreds of families on the wait list for affordable housing, and there is not even an estimated time for when housing will be made available. An organization in my riding has submitted an application to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing for capital funding over their national allocation for a much-needed project. They, along with many other organizations, realize the urgent need for housing in many of these rural communities. Seniors on fixed incomes and persons with disability are often on the losing end of this housing crisis. This organization is looking to get funding to transform a recently closed long-term care facility into a supportive rental housing project. This would create 30 apartments for seniors, singles, and persons with disability. This seems like a logical thing to do. The space is there, the need is there. These are the sorts of projects we need to support and move forward in order to create housing spaces that are so greatly needed in our province. We need this government to commit to building housing that meets the needs of the people of this province. In September 2010, my colleague Sherry DeNovo introduced a private member's bill to strengthen tenant protections. Its provisions included strengthening rent control, implementing landlord licensing, protecting tenants from excessive utility charges increases, extend protection to more tenants, implementing a standard lease agreement, and improving access to justice for tenants. These are small measures that we must make in order to crack down on slum landlords who are seriously taking advantage and often the most marginalized people in our province. We need to address the gap between low-income households and market rent so that people like the single mother I mentioned earlier, people like the seniors and persons with disability and other low-income folks are not burdened each and every day with whether the first of the month they will have a roof over their heads or not. Speaker, I believe this bill fails to address the real concerns of this province, the need to make life more affordable for all Ontarians. And again, Speaker, I will say we can do better, and we must.